Tiger fans, you're now tuned in to Tiger Rag Television, your source for the latest in LSU sports, in-depth game analysis, engaging interviews, and all things Tiger Nation. It's time to talk some LSU sports. Let's get ready for your Tiger Rag hosts, Jim Inkster, Chelsea Brumfield, Jeff Palermo, Ron Higgins, and Tyler Nunez.
Hello, I'm Jim Inkster, and welcome to Tiger Rag Television. What a game it was in Tuscaloosa. LSU 46, Alabama 41, and the game of the century. And that's our topic tonight. We'll be talking about it with all of our experts. Ron Higgins, the editor of Tiger Rag, Tyler Nunez, the assistant editor, Glenn Guilbeau, featured columnist, and Jeff Palermo, the news and sports director for the Louisiana Radio Network. Also tonight, we're going to visit with the first LSU basketball player of a minority, Collis Temple, who enrolled at LSU in the year of 1970. He's a big football follower. This is an interview that has a lot of layers, and we'll get to them with Collis Temple. And coming next, we'll visit with Glenn Guilbeau. Does Coach O now have the supreme position in the Southeastern Conference over Nick Saban? We'll talk about it when we return. I'm Jim Inkster, and we're talking in the crossfire with the Twin G, Glenn Guilbeau, the man from the USA Network, who's a featured columnist for Tiger Rag magazine. And it was a game for the ages Saturday in Tuscaloosa, and this time LSU won. The last game of the century, LSU won that one too, but as we know, there were 8 losses sandwiched between. And Glenn Guilbeau, this was a big, big win in so many ways, but is it a harbinger to come? Does it mean that Coach O is now supreme? Or is that guy Saban just going to take this and come back and take care of business for the next 8 times?
You know, Ivan Mizell, great writer, went to Alabama from Mobile. He wrote yesterday, the day after the game, that it could signal the end of the Saban dynasty. And Ivan is just a great writer and smart person, put on the whole college football documentaries. But I don't agree with that. They said that about Saban a few years ago, and then he hired Lane Kiffin and turned everything around. I think he's still pretty good. He's having, and I said this before the game, I mean, this is not one of his better defenses. He's had some injuries. He's played some young guys. He's always recruited well. I think he'll be back. But as Ron Higgins also said, LSU's going to be back too. I mean, Ed is putting together the best 2 recruiting classes, 2019 and 2020, that they've had since Saban in 03, 04. And if one of the quarterbacks in those classes, or Miles Brennan, or a new quarterback, that's what they need. They got to make sure they keep getting good quarterbacks in. But everything else is great. I mean, I see LSU being a power.
And Saban loses Tua, and he played gallantly, 418 yards passing. He was not at top speed, that was apparent, but under the circumstances, he had a very good game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he threw 4 touchdowns, threw for 400 yards. Alabama's defense lost that game and a couple of Tua mistakes. But, you know, Burrow had a fumble, too, and he also had an interception, but Alabama had too many men on the field. So, you know, he had his issues, too. But he played better than Tua, but really, you know, there wasn't a lot of defense in that game.
No, 87 points and 1,100 total yards. Not much defense, and maybe that's a sign of the times. And
sure.
These are coaches who have adjusted. Now, Saban is 68, Orgeron's 58. They're no kids, but they could conceivably be around for the next decade. And the question is, what does that decade look like? Saban's won 10 out of 15 games against LSU, including the Independence Bowl loss to Jerry DiNardo. So it would seem that Alabama will be likely the favorite to dominate the next decade. But based on what you're saying, friend of Nick, that Coach O has a shot to change all that.
Oh, I think so. I mean, he's definitely the best challenger to Nick Saban in the SEC right now. And, I mean, he has a very good chance of winning the national championship this year. LSU will be the first non-Alabama team to win the national title, if they do, since Florida
in the SEC, right?
From the SEC since 2008. But the way Coach Orgeron is recruiting,
well,
I think he's going to be around.
Auburn 1-10.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. I forgot about that one. Sorry, Gus. But I think it's going to be O and Saban for some time.
Well, this is a rivalry that Alabama has dominated. They've won 53 times, LSU's won 26, but LSU fans always hope that this is the turning point, that this is the catalyst. Maybe they're right, maybe they're not, but Coach O, he's got to keep doing it. You know the fans are restless. They're not going to tolerate another 16-28 for 4 years like Curly Hallman. He's got to keep doing it. And they talk about pressure. He's a millionaire either way. But on the field, he's got to keep producing or he'll be history.
Well, I think he is going to keep producing. I mean, they got over the hump with Alabama, and they're going to have a great chance of winning the national championship this year. And they're going to be really good next year. I mean, they still have a lot of talent in the program. The key is that he keeps getting good quarterbacks. Now, obviously, you can't have another Joe Burrow. I mean, he might be a generational quarterback, but you got to have better quarterbacks than what you had between Mettenberger and Burrow. You got to have better quarterbacks than that. And, there should be no reason for them not to do that. And Coach O has proven that he can do what it takes by making a hire like he did with Joe Brady. That took guts because nobody was trying to hire Joe Brady from the Saints. He was basically a GA, but Orgeron saw something in him and made the hire. And if he keeps his staff together, he's going to have a very good run.
Now, one of the quarterbacks who may be available is Chandler Morris, top recruit out of Dallas. His dad, Chad Morris, just got the axe at Arkansas. He had recruited his son. And he's available, and it shows what can happen at other places. And LSU went through a tough time with Curly Hallman and a few years with Jerry DiNardo. But Arkansas, the last 2 years, is 0-14 in the SEC. They're 0-13 against Nick Saban. And this is a program that won the national title 55 years ago and came close a few times with Lou Holtz. What in the world has happened in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Glenn Guilbeau?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Chandler Morris because the way LSU's offense has been going this year, you'd think there'd be a great senior quarterback out there in high school who would say, man, I want to go play for them. So usually recruiting's done 2 years in advance and all this, but it seems like LSU could attract somebody for this offense. But Arkansas, they really haven't been good in a while in football. I just think they're kind of an outlier in the SEC. And they were an outlier in the Southwest Conference too. But I just think it's hard to get people to go to Fayetteville to play football.
Fayetteville
to play football, and that state is not known for a lot of talent. Not a lot of football talent in the state of Arkansas. So that is one of the more difficult jobs. Mm-hmm. And I don't see them ever being a threat, and they really haven't been a threat in the SEC in football. Now they're good in all the other sports, but they just haven't done it in football.
No, the South Carolina and Arkansas are now 0-28.
Right.
And there's some question as to whether they're legitimate SEC powers, but Arkansas is a place where Frank Broyles, remember when he took the job before you and I were born, he left Missouri to come to Arkansas. And he had a great career there, 7 Southwest Conference championships, sometimes going to the extra level or a higher level, joining the SEC. I'm not sure that was beneficial to the University of Arkansas.
No, and I don't think it was to the SEC either, really. When you think of television sets in the market, Fayetteville, I don't see that. But they did enhance basketball briefly when Nolan Richardson was the
National
coach.
title.
That was great and really challenged Kentucky like nobody had. And they're a dynasty in track and very good at baseball as well. But and Frank Broyles, didn't he coach the team while doing the announcing on ABC?
No.
Oh, that was after.
Well,
okay.
Maybe a game or two. It wasn't a full-time gig. But he was athletic director while he was doing
That's
it.
right.
So he's
That's
missing a lot of Arkansas games.
Right.
But he was a great coach. Glenn Guilbeau's always a great guest, and we'll be catching up with him again soon. And we'll return with more Tiger Rag Television after this brief pause.
Hello, everyone. Jeff Palermo, News and Sports Director of Louisiana Radio Network. We are back on Tiger Rag Television.
Tiger Rag, Six Pack.
6 hot-button questions for Tiger Rag editor Ron Higgins and assistant editor Tyler Nunez. Question number 1 for you guys. LSU's win over Alabama on Saturday. Is this the beginning of a win streak against the Crimson Tide for the Fighting Tigers, or was this one win and now Alabama dominates the series for the next few years?
Well, as far as I can tell, Nick Saban's still breathing. So, yeah, I don't think this is the start of a win streak. People have a tendency to just go overboard when they beat Alabama and they think Alabama's going right down the drain. As long as Nick Saban's there, they're not going anywhere. And they're going to be very highly contested games from now on because LSU has that offense. I can see a string of LSU-Alabama games like this because Orgeron has stepped up his recruiting. LSU's got a better offense. So it could be like this for the next 4 or 5 years or whenever Nick wants to retire.
I tend to agree. I don't know if this is necessarily a win streak, and I'm sure LSU and Ed Orgeron, the Tigers, they're not even worried about this. They're focused on Ole Miss. That being said, I think it's going to be an interesting test over the next few years, especially considering what we saw this weekend. It was really a dominant performance by the Tigers. If they want this to continue, they're going to have to maintain that kind of success in recruiting, on the football field, in the coaching staff. That's something that Alabama's done over the last decade with Nick Saban, and if LSU wants to continue to compete, they're going to have to do that too.
All right, question number 2 in the Tiger Rag 6-pack. Will LSU face Alabama in the playoffs?
Right now, I'm going to say no, but that's a very tentative no. I think a lot of things can happen if Ohio State loses, if Minnesota loses a game, if other teams kind of lose and things don't go their way. Alabama can definitely sneak and backdoor their way into the college football playoff. Back in the BCS era, they did it with a national championship game when there were only 2 teams. If they've done it in the college football playoff era already, they can definitely find a way in the playoffs. But right now, as things stand, if the teams in front of them continue to win out, I think that right now they're on the outside looking in.
Go back to the SEC Championship game day of 2007. You got Les Miles saying, "Have a nice day," after he says he's not going to go to Michigan. And then LSU, which looks out of the national championship game, all hell breaks loose that day. 3 or 4 teams lose. LSU's in the title game after losing to Arkansas in overtime, the last regular season game. And LSU wins the national championship. Should Alabama get in this year? Honestly, with that schedule, are you kidding me? But, it's Alabama, and a lot of times they just get preferential treatment because they're Alabama. I don't think they should be in it, but again, a lot of teams could lose to get them in it.
You never know. Maybe there's Alabama fatigue within the College Football Playoff Committee, too. Question number 3 for the Tiger Rag 6-pack. Is LSU's defense good enough to win a national championship after giving up 41 points to the Crimson Tide?
You look late in the game and they were still giving up points, but again, you're dealing with Tua Tagovailoa, and the guy can throw darts if you let him do it all day. I'd say right now, the way this game is played in college and the way LSU outscores people and they just don't really care who's scoring on them, yeah, I think they could win a national championship with this team. I mean, they gave up 31 in the second half to Texas and never trailed. I think they gave up, 28 in the second half against Alabama and never trailed because you got Joe Burrow. As long as you got Joe Burrow, your defense can give up a lot of points and LSU can still win games.
Yeah, LSU's defense has taken the Tigers this far. I think that they can take them all the way. I think that some of the mistakes on defense, some of them were coaching errors. You look at what happened to Derek Stingley. That wasn't his fault at all. I mean, the pass went over the top of him when he was looking over at the sideline, looking for direction when he was supposed to. And Ed Orgeron took responsibility for that, and that's going to be fixed in the future. But I think this defense as a whole, athletically, is good enough to get stops when necessary, to force turnovers when necessary. Look at that turnover, that interception by Patrick Queen at the second half. That completely changes the scope of the game. It gave LSU all the control going in the second half, and it gave the offense a huge cushion to work with. And I think that if they can continue to play like that, this LSU team has a long way to go.
Question number 4 for the Tiger Rag 6-pack. What is Ed Orgeron's best attribute as a head coach? Tyler?
I think it's his ability to find coaches that have strengths where he has weaknesses. I think he tried to micromanage a lot whenever he was at Ole Miss, and it had disastrous effects on his career. He obviously got fired and kind of bounced around as an assistant head coach from there. I think he found out that if he wanted to be a head coach again, he would have to find guys that were good at what he's not good at. And that involves admitting to yourself that you're not that good at some things. And I think he's done a great job with his assistants. Look at the hire of Joe Brady. He knew they needed a spread offense. He went out and found a guy who could implement that offense. He's kept Dave Aranda on staff. I think that finding a coaching staff that can surround him with strengths where he has weaknesses has led to huge success for LSU.
There's so many things about Ed Orgeron that you like. One is that he fixes problems in a hurry, like Tyler mentioned, the offense not scoring enough to win national championships. He went and got Joe Brady. Then there's the fact that Ed Orgeron coaches without ego. And he did micromanage at Ole Miss. I saw it myself when I was working in Memphis. He was a train wreck. And then 3, Ed Orgeron really knows his players and personnel. And not just on the field, he knows everything about them. Ed Orgeron is such a good recruiter. He gets to know their families, everybody. And he has a personal touch that's hard to match. And he doesn't forget about guys either. Even guys he didn't get to sign recruiting. Look at the Auburn defensive line after the game. Orgeron was hugging them, telling them good game. So they were great. That's what Orgeron's all about. He's a personal guy with deep roots.
All right, only got a couple more minutes left here in the Tiger Rag 6-pack. Question number 5, better individual performance. What we saw Saturday with Clyde Edwards-Helaire against Alabama, or Jacob Hester's performance in 2007 against Florida?
Jacob, I love you. I understand I love you. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire, what he did in that game, not just scoring 4 touchdowns, but the extra effort to get yardage after he was hit, especially in impossible third down situations where you think LSU is not going to get the first down, and he's dragging people past the spot to get the first down. Frankly, I've never seen anything like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, what he did against Alabama. He was tremendous. The touchdowns on the goal line, the spin move, Alabama guy diving in air. And, I understand these teams. Look at Clyde on film. How many times does he got to spin for them to figure out he spins really well? Alabama never figured it out. I thought it was great. Again, Jacob, love you, but.
Yeah, it looked like Clyde was abusing the circle button in a game of Madden. He looked phenomenal out there with that spin move and evading defenders. It was a complete game performance and one that not a lot of people saw. I'm going with Clyde too. It might be recency bias though.
All right, final question for the Tiger Rag 6-pack. Mike Leach, do you think he's a good fit at Arkansas? Should the Razorbacks go after him?
I think the Razorbacks should go after him. I'm not sure Mike Leach should take that job. It's kind of a train wreck up there right now. Really, really tough job to take on right now. So I'm going to say Mike Leach. I know you want to coach in the SEC, but maybe back off this one.
The only reason he's a good fit is because it's near a recruiting area where Mike Leach once recruited in Texas. And his offense is wide open. I know Arkansas was supposed to be, but there's something about Mike Leach. He can be a little abrasive. He's a little crazy, and yeah, he likes pirates and like crazy stuff. But the guy is a passing whiz. That's the way the game is played now. He knows where all the recruits are in Texas, and he might be able to get in Oklahoma. Yeah, you could do worse than Mike Leach. I could see him going to Arkansas. It's a hard place to recruit to, but he could do it.
Seems like Arkansas needs something to get that program off the ground. It is a bottom basement team, maybe one of the worst teams the SEC has ever seen, at least in the last 20, 30 years. That does it for the Tiger Rag 6-pack. We'll have more of Tiger Rag Television when we come back.
Welcome back. I'm Jim Inkster, and it's a pleasure to have as the interview leadoff man today, Ron Higgins, our new editor of the Bible of LSU Sports, Tiger Rag. And Ron was with us long ago and far away before I was involved, back in the Steve Myers, Steve Townsend days. Back in the 1970s, very young Ron Higgins began his career with Tiger Rag.
I was around when disco was hot, man.
Yeah, Night Fever.
Yeah, really.
Staying alive.
And I probably dressed just as bad as John Travolta in the movie, the heels and everything, really bad.
Well, you've stayed in pretty good shape, as has Travolta. So Ron Higgins is still at the top of his game all these years later. And there have been a few stops along the way.
A lot of stops along the way. Shreveport, Baton Rouge, the Advocate for a year. I spent most of my career in Memphis with the Commercial Appeal, where I got to know the entire SEC. Was in Mobile for about a year and a half, and came back and replaced myself in Memphis, where they never turned off my phone messages or my emails. And then ended up, in New Orleans with the Times-Picayune for 5 or 6 years, and then Clarion Ledger and Tiger Details, and here I am back where I started. Like it was, the circle of life.
It's amazing. 1979, when
Right.
you're first starting after graduating from LSU. The LSU quarterback's a guy named Steve Ensminger, and they have an 8-game losing streak against Alabama. They lost 3-0 to a team that won the national title, the last for the Bear. Ensminger, of course, is now the offensive coordinator. And fate was a little kinder to Ed Orgeron Saturday than it was to Charlie McClendon in the year of 1979. But you're one guy who covered both games.
Yeah, and all I know is, I may be the first Tiger Rag editor ever to win his first game against Alabama. So all the guys in the past, James Moran, Cody Worsham, all you guys, I just set a record last week. I started out 1-0
against Nick Saban.
Against Nick Saban,
who's done pretty well in this series. He was 4-1 against Alabama when he was head coach at LSU, and that's a testament to how good he is. But Saturday, his defense looked perplexed by Joe Burrow, who's probably going to win the Heisman Trophy. Something you know about, your dad was the SID when Billy Cannon won it 60 years ago.
Yeah, he was, and Billy used to talk about that all the time. Every time I saw him, he talked about that. Actually, LSU probably should have had a Heisman Trophy winner in '62 with Jerry Stovall, who I think remains the best overall player in LSU history. If you go back and look at what he did and all his stats, running back, defensive back, punter, returner, did everything. And he finished second to Terry Baker of Oregon State. And Jerry probably should have won that year. LSU had a winner since '59 with Cannon. I think they got one this year. Joe needs to finish up strong. But now the way the Heisman works, it's no longer, back in the day before everything wasn't televised, it was a publicity campaign. It was, a lot of gimmicks and hype. Now you go win it on TV in the major games, and he's played well in every major game this year.
More people watched this Alabama game than any college football game in the last 8 years. The last time a similar audience watched was when LSU played Alabama in Tuscaloosa in the previous game of the century. And those are the 2 wins for LSU with 8 losses sandwiched between. Is this a harbinger of things to come, or is this just a blip on Saban's radar that he'll correct?
Well, I think Nick always corrects stuff, but I also think LSU's not going anywhere either. Ed Orgeron's really recruiting well. He's got it going on. People want to play for this offense. They like what he's doing. They like him as a coach. They like him as a person. And so, I think LSU now is a serious challenger to Alabama. And I don't think Alabama's slacking off. Alabama's had some problems this year. They had a lot of injuries in the preseason with their defense. Tua's been banged up. But I'm not, no excuses for Alabama. Nick doesn't make excuses. They got beat the other day. And he'll tell you probably the better team won. Ed Orgeron certainly thought the better team won.
You and I are old enough to remember, Ron, when Ole Miss was the biggest game on the schedule. It's not any longer, but it's still a big rivalry. And timing is everything. For years, when Charlie McClendon was coach, LSU had all kinds of problems with Mississippi State, primarily because the game came after the Alabama game. Ole Miss is positioned well, the game's at Oxford. Any chance of a surprise this weekend?
Well, Ole Miss was always that fly in the ointment type deal, just a history. But honestly, LSU's first in the league in passing offense. Ole Miss is last in passing defense, and Ole Miss is one-dimensional offensively. LSU could come out a little bit unfocused in the beginning and get it going, or they come out on fire and just blow the doors off. You never know what you're going to get. But in this series, you really never know what you're going to get. There's been so many crazy things happen. This is a series that has spanned the decades. There's links to the past. Ole Miss quarterback, Coach Matt Luke, his brother played, Tom Luke, and his father, Tom Luke, was a defensive back in the '64 game when LSU threw the 2-point conversion pass to Morrow. It bounced off of Tom Luke's shoulder pad, and Doug Morrow caught it for the game-winning 2-point conversion in the northeast corner of the end zone.
11-10.
11-10 game, and LSU looked dead in that game, and they stole that game. So many games, series like that. And the fascinating thing to me is when I worked in Memphis, I got to know the Ole Miss people. I got to see a different side of it. And one of the most fascinating days I ever spent was at Johnny Vaught's house and just talking LSU Ole Miss with him. And he was fabulous. He was sharp. This is great to talk to. I said, all those years you played the game most of the time in Baton Rouge. I said, why? He goes, well, because I thought I could beat him, and we got a good chunk of the gate. I couldn't get that kind of gate in Jackson or Oxford.
That is true.
Yeah.
Ole Miss played most of the games in the Vaught era in Baton Rouge by choice.
Yeah.
That would never happen today. Couldn't happen. The SEC wouldn't allow it. But Ole Miss was quite a factor in Charlie McClendon's career. 1969, LSU, 50 years ago, would have quite possibly won the national championship, except for losing 26-23 at Jackson to Archie Manning.
Yeah, 2 years in a row, 68, 69, LSU had him dead. I mean, up 2-3 touchdowns, and Archie brought him back. Louisiana eventually forgave Archie because he went quarterback the Saints, and he, Norman's favorite native son until Drew showed up, Drew Brees. But Archie was kind of like a thorn in LSU's side. Of course, in the 1970 game, he played with a broken arm, and LSU won that game handily. But that was LSU Ole Miss is always fascinating stuff that happens. I mean, you can go back to Wyatt Tittle having his pants yanked, belt buckle yanked off.
That's true. Cost LSU a game.
Yeah, cost LSU the game.
He was going in for the winning touchdown
Right.
and lost his pants.
Right. Probably the greatest play in Southern football history, one of the greatest, Billy Cannon's Halloween run. Just go through the years. There's games, Burt Jones and Brad Davis, and then, LSU running 2 plays in like 6 seconds. So many crazy things in this game. I mean, even the one with Les Miles and the time clock management. And I'll never forget this. All the confusion after, they didn't call timeout. And they talked to Houston Nutt after the game. And I was with an AP reporter, we're talking to him. Houston said, yeah, I almost caught, when LSU had the ball right there, I almost called timeout there. I'm like, did I really hear he wanted to call timeout? Went back and listened to the tape after I left. I said, he wanted to call timeout, really? And do LSU a favor? That's what kind of Les did. He confused everybody. He sucked everybody into his ball of confusion. But you have that with LSU Ole Miss, strange things.
Well, we'll see this week, Saturday, if it'll be strange at Vaught Hemingway Stadium. 1969, when LSU lost that memorable game in Jackson that probably cost Charlie McClendon his only shot at a national title. Ken Cavanaugh, who was on that team, he said, Charlie McClendon blamed the game not on Archie Manning, but on the fact that his team had seen Easy Rider the night before and their minds just were not in the game. But we'll see what happens Saturday, and good to visit with Ron Higgins. We'll be back with Collis Temple after this timeout on Tiger Rag Television. I'm Jim Inkster, and our interview segment continues with Collis Temple, one of the most famous names in LSU basketball history and a member of the LSU Athletic Hall of Fame, an honor that has been accorded to him, but not to Pete Maravich. Should be to Pete, but
absolutely it should be to Pete.
And we probably will do a show on that with you very soon.
Sure.
But you're a big LSU football follower, and something happened Saturday in Tuscaloosa of note.
It was a tremendous win for the Tigers. I think, in real time, the number 1 team won, and the number 1 athletic director and Scott Woodard won. And so I guess 1 and 1 is 2, so that made Orgeron, it makes Orgeron the number 1 college coach in America right now. That's what I think.
Well, belated happy birthday to Collis, who just made 67.
That's correct.
67, and he came here in the year of 1970 when you were 17. So according to my math, that's right at 50 years.
That's right, 50-year anniversary. Over at Kentwood High, we had our 50-year reunion for the state championship football team where we were, I think we were probably 13-1 that year. Jamie Spears and I, we teamed up and got us a football state championship, and then came in second in basketball, but we had a pretty good time the other night.
And you had some famous children too.
They were okay. They've done pretty well.
Well, Garrett
Both
is
of them.
amazing. Here's a guy, you talk about a fellow who's a study in tenacity.
Yeah.
Of all the members of that 2006 Final Four team, he probably would have been considered the least likely to have the longest career.
Correct.
But he's still in the game.
Averaging about 22 to 24 minutes a game, which are really starter minutes. And the other night he had 15 or 16 points, and the next game he had 13. And last night I think he was 3 for 5 from three-point range, and they had a chance to win when he was in the game. He still plays great defense and shoots well.
And Collis played briefly in the biggest league.
That's correct.
With George Gervin as your roommate with San Antonio.
That's right.
The Iceman.
My man.
But before that, you were the first African-American to play basketball at LSU. You cracked the color barrier, and you were one of the first black athletes on campus. I'm just guessing, but there were probably, 100 black students on campus when you arrived?
Maybe between 50 and 100 black students. Not very many. And of course, Lloyd Wills was a track athlete. So Lloyd and I were the two black athletes out of golf, tennis, basketball, swimming, baseball, football. I guess 175 athletes, 2 black athletes. Yeah.
And now it's changed, and for the better. And black athletes are the dominant contributors in football and basketball. Our friend Harry Edwards, the sociologist, he said watching LSU and Alabama's play is like watching Ghana play Nigeria.
Yeah, that's really interesting comment because, in real time, that's where we are right now in football and basketball and track and field. I mean, it's gone on and for the betterment because, the athletes that get it done. I mean, Joe Burrow comes from a long way away and comes in here and he would be considered a Yankee, I guess, but he's doing some tremendous things, some amazing things.
Yeah, not only is poised to win the Heisman, Collis, but he's playing with a group of young men who came from different backgrounds than he.
That's right.
And most of them are African American, so his ability to adapt is significant.
And it's gonna pay great dividends when he goes to the next level because it's all about being able to communicate and be an effective leader as you communicate. And when you're able to do that, you end up with a lot of wins on your side. So he's a special guy.
Now, you had to make a choice to come here, and you and your father decided LSU was the place. But it was not without some sacrifice. You had some challenges. Not everybody was happy to see Collis Temple on campus in 1970.
That's true. Some of the folk were not necessarily happy to see me there. And one guy in particular was David Duke, who he wasn't real particular about me being there. He and I had serious discussions on occasion in Free Speech Alley, which is, I'm sure you're familiar with Free Speech Alley. And ironic as it would be, there were a number of African American people who didn't think that I should have gone to LSU. I should have gone to Southern University, where my dad went to school, and 4 of my 5 sisters went. And so there was a mixed bag of considerations going on both sides of the equation. I was a fairly good athlete, and so a lot of people felt like I should have been playing football or basketball at Southern University rather than LSU.
Collis was drafted by the NFL. Did Charlie McClendon ever try to get you to play football?
Oh, he talked to me about playing, but Coach Maravich just wouldn't have any of that conversation. In fact, he was really irritated that the guy talked to me about it. But I played in the high school all-star game, and I was being recruited by Nebraska and Kansas and Colorado in football out of high school. And so I very well I would have been able to play for LSU, but it was meant for me to play basketball, and that's what happened.
And then after Press Maravich is fired, a guy named Dale Brown comes in.
He rolls in at 36 or 37 years old, hot shot, a hot shot guy, talking it up and spouting off about what he was going to do and how things were going to work. And of course, he gave us 25 good years. He's a great coach and a better man.
And within a decade, actually less than a decade from you cracking the color barrier, LSU had an all African-American starting lineup. When you look at that Final Four team in 1981, they were all black players. And Willie Sims was a 6th man, and I think he was African-American. And Dale Brown took some grief for doing that as well.
I recall, I remember I don't remember who we were playing, but I remember the game that Jody Hochberg became the 6th man. There were 4 black players on the court, and Ethan Martin was the 6th man. And then Ethan went in the game, and it was Ethan and Kenny Higgs,
Lionel Green,
Scales, and Rudy Macklin. And of course, Dale kept Ethan in the game. Once he went in, he didn't come back out. And that was the night that he decided to play full tilt 5 African-American players. And there were clearly a lot of concerns about that. And but Dale was, you know, his feeling was, well, Ethan's a better ball distributor. Mm-hmm. Kenny Higgs could score the ball, and so Jordy ended up being the 6th man.
Will Wade, he's been under fire, won an SEC title last year. Some people thought he had coached his last game at LSU, including yours truly, but he's back. Is the noise in the background going to keep him from accomplishing what he could, or is it going to be a case where he can overcome this?
I candidly think that Will is a good coach. He's a good coach. And he, you know, there's a lot more that goes into coaching than recruiting. There's a lot more that goes into coaching than planning and on the floor technician. I think Will is probably good at every angle, except he got carried away on some phone conversations. And I think that those things hurt him. Obviously they did, caused him a lot of stressors. And of course he looks like he may bounce back. So we'll find out. But I think he's a pretty good basketball coach.
He's on the cover of the November issue of Tiger Rag, which is the basketball issue, and not many coaches would revel in being called American Gangster, but that's his nickname.
Yeah.
He's smiling.
Yeah, that's what I think he took the title away from Bruce Pearl.
He's still around too.
Yeah, he is in Auburn. A good coach, very good coach.
Well, Collis mentioned Scott Woodward, and for those who are unaware, Collis was pushing for him to be the athletic director for a long time. And it happened, and what do you think?
I think we have one of the finest athletic directors in the country, to say the least. And probably the greatest thing about Scott is he is a homegrown guy who understands the culture of the everyday Tiger fan. When you understand the culture of the everyday Tiger fan, and you can put things in motion, and you're an effective communicator with the fans, you understand and appreciate the athletes, and you particularly recognize how to manage coaches, both how to hire and fire coaches, then you have a pretty good package. And he's that guy. I mean, he fired the football guy from A&M, and then hired
Jimbo
a second guy. I call him the $100 million man. He got him a $75 million football coach and a $25 million basketball coach, and it looks like he's going to do okay.
Well, and he left a university with an enormous endowment for one that does not have a big endowment, last in the SEC. But Scott Woodward's an LSU guy. He wants to be here, and so far, so good. Now, you have a 16-year-old, Collis, who just turned 67. If, according to my math, that would have made you past 50 when your beautiful daughter was born. She's quite an athlete.
Colleen is a very, very good athlete. She's a special volleyball player, in my opinion, and I'm not being biased. She likes basketball, and she's a pretty good basketball player. But the thing she does best that I'm most proud of is that 35 ACT in English language that she scored. I'm really, really thrilled about the fact that she's a very, very good student.
She might end up being mayor, governor, president, and I know she has stated on a radio show I host that she has political aspirations.
Yeah.
Some thought you might go into politics, but you never did, at least as an office seeker. Maybe in the background, a few races Collis has been involved with. Before we leave, I wanted to finish with a story that now, it's a different context than it was at the time, but there was a time when you went into a restaurant here in Baton Rouge and the service wasn't that great.
That's true.
What happened?
I went into a restaurant and the service wasn't that great, and I went into some establishments like Common Ground and the Keg and the Cotton Club and those kind of places, and I was not allowed to go in. And of course, I went to this one establishment, and I was asked to leave after I made an order. And I was, they talked about, they gave some derogatory,
We don't serve.
terms. We don't serve the N-word. And I said, I understand. I appreciate that. I don't eat ends, and I didn't order an end. I ordered a po' boy. And so, they were a little bit irritated, and I understand why, and it's because I was a smart aleck guy. And so I was asked to leave for sure, and I ended up leaving, but that was fine too.
Well, it's turned out okay. There have been more good times than bad.
That's correct.
Collis Temple, I'm sure, will be with us again very soon if we have our way. Thank you, Collis, for being with us.
Glad to be with you.
We'll be back after this brief timeout with more Tiger Rag Television.
Back on Tiger Rag Television, Jeff Palermo along with Tiger Rag editor Ron Higgins and assistant editor Tyler Nunez.
Predictions.
Time to take a look at this weekend's action in the Southeastern Conference. A few good games to look at. Let's start off with South Carolina against A&M. The Aggies are a 10.5-point favorite. Ron, who do you like?
Well, South Carolina lost to Appalachian State last week. Yes, Appalachian State. No disrespect to Appalachian State, but South Carolina should not be losing to Appalachian State. This is kind of like a desperation versus perspiration game. A&M hasn't been tearing up this year. I like A&M in this one. I just don't think Carolina can get its act together.
No love for the Sun Belt Conference here. I also think that A&M's probably going to win this game. I do think South Carolina keeps it closer than 10.5 points. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a close game than that, but I do think A&M is a much better team top to bottom.
Alabama has to go to Starkville. Crimson Tide, a 21.5-point favorite. Tyler, does Alabama have any kind of a hangover from the loss to LSU?
If I know Nick Saban, he doesn't do hangovers. I think that this team is going to come in there angry against a divisional rival, and they're just going to stomp Mississippi State. No offense to Jim Moorhead or what he's doing there. I know he's trying his best, but Alabama still Alabama. Mississippi State still Mississippi State. I think Alabama wins this one and covers easy.
The best thing about Alabama losing last week to LSU was that at home was they didn't have to walk home. They were home. They lose to Mississippi State, they will be walking back to Tuscaloosa. Alabama covers this one by halftime, maybe even in the first quarter. State isn't very good at all. And Alabama, when they're angry, they're not fun to play. And I can see maybe not a perfect game by Alabama, and there'll probably be some mistakes, and Nick probably won't be happy anyway, but they'll still win by about 38.
Interesting game on the Plains in Alabama. Georgia at Auburn. Bulldogs, they are a 3-point favorite in this contest.
I'm going to go with Georgia. I don't think Auburn's, offensively is that good. They just don't have enough yet. And maybe they will in a couple of years. And honestly, I think is maybe a little bit of distraction now. Gus Malzahn is an Arkansas native. They've been trying to get Gus back to Arkansas for years. And the way Auburn's played this year, Auburn's fans would gladly help him pack to go to Arkansas to take the job. Maybe a bit of a distraction, but I think Georgia's just a better team overall. On both sides of the ball, better team, Georgia, and they cover.
Yeah, I think Georgia's offense has been a little bit underwhelming this year, and Auburn's defense has been phenomenal, but I just think Georgia's offense is just too good, and Auburn's offense isn't good enough to get in the end zone enough to keep up with them. I think it'll probably be a really close game for about a half, maybe 3 quarters, and then Georgia runs away with it late.
All right, Saturday night in Oxford, the Fighting Tigers of LSU take on the Ole Miss Rebels. LSU a 3-touchdown favorite. Do the Fighting Tigers cover, Tyler?
I think they do. I think it'll probably be a situation where they come out a little sluggish, but this offense is so high-powered. They're going to score at will in the second half. They're going to get their groove, and it's going to be over from there. And I think LSU's defense, they might let Plumlee get down the field a few times, but I don't see them letting him in the end zone very often with his lack of passing ability. So I think LSU covers this game.
Ole Miss leads the SEC in rushing. It's a very one-dimensional offense. You stop that, you stop them. LSU's first in the SEC in red zone offense. Ole Miss is last in red zone defense. LSU's first in passing. Ole Miss is last in passing defense. Yeah, they cover this thing. It could be all, a little bit of suspense. It all is in Oxford, you never know. But yeah, LSU wins this one and covers.
Yeah, I like LSU too. I think that stat you just brought up, Ron, the fact that Ole Miss can't stop anybody from throwing the football, and that's LSU's strength this year. That's not a good recipe for the Rebels, but it could be a little bit of a sluggish start. There's no doubt about that. That's our picks for this Saturday. More of Tiger Rag Television when we come back.
Thanks for joining us this week for Tiger Rag Television. We'll be back next week, same time, same place, and Chelsea Brumfield returns. And we'll be talking about LSU's game against Ole Miss. The Fighting Tigers are probably on their way to being 10-0, and we'll keep you posted every step of the way on what could be a historic year not only for quarterback Joe Burrow, but for Coach Ed O, who's trying to win LSU's first national championship in 11 years. We're back next week. Be with us.
Mm-hmm.